Merlot. Is it the worst grape variety in the world? If you listen to some wine experts, you might think it is. Merlot bashing was almost as popular as Chardonnay bashing, especially when the two grape varieties experienced great success in the 90s and early noughties. Chardonnay is still growing strong, while Merlot suffered a unique decline. I mean, tastes change and grape varieties fall out of favor, that is not uncommon, but Merlot's fortune turned when a movie was released pretty much exactly 20 years ago. The movie was called Sideways, and on its 20th anniversary, I want to see whether it's time to revisit Merlot. Let's go. I know I have talked about Sideways a few times before on this channel, but I recently bought the book and I realized that the probably most famous wine-related movie scene ever,
if anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I am not drinking any fucking Merlot!
Does not appear in it. I mean, the main character, Miles, talks a lot about how he loves Pinot, and he also makes it clear that he doesn't like Merlot. But the most famous line from the movie originally was, "They're not going to order any Merlot. They're way too hip for that. And if they do, I'm splitting." Regardless, the story had a strong impact on the US wine market in particular, causing a drastic decline in interest in Merlot while boosting Pinot's image. According to data from the US Department of Agriculture, in 2004, when the movie came out, the Merlot acreage was at 52,000. For all of my European viewers, 1 hectare equals 2.47 acres. The acreage for Pinot Noir, meanwhile, was at the same time at 24,000. 20 years later, in 2024, the total acreage for Merlot was at 33,500, while the acreage for Pinot Noir was at 46,500. So Pinot had almost doubled, while Merlot had declined significantly. It is crazy what a difference a movie makes, even though there were probably other factors at play as well. However, Merlot globally is still going strong. It's the second most widely planted grape variety after Cabernet Sauvignon. So I asked my team to select interesting Merlots from all 4 corners of the world to find out whether Merlot really is crap or simply has a bad rap. Whoa, the rhymes are back in 2025. Let's taste. So let's start off with the first wine, which is the 2019 Golen Heights Winery Yarden Merlot from Israel. The winery was established in 1983 and it's a pretty big producer making lots of different wines from different grape varieties, from different vineyards. The vineyards are located at elevated altitudes between 400 and 1,200 meters above sea level. The grapes for this wine here are sourced from different vineyard plots and they are vinified separately. And yeah, the wine is aged for 18 months in oak. 40% of the barrels were new. The wine is actually kosher. I mean, not anymore maybe. I don't know whether it's already, I already unkoshered it, but I've talked to winemakers who produce kosher wines, not necessarily Jewish winemakers, but yeah, I just heard that it's quite complicated. It adds a dimension of complication to the winemaking process that they are mostly not used to. But I mean, it's part of the religion. So, and apparently there's a fairly big market for kosher wines all around the world. However, what I'm more interested in is the wine any good? Let's find out. The wine is pretty dark in color, but it turns garnet towards the rim. Merlot generally is a little lighter in color compared to Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, but it's a dark colored grape variety producing dark colored wine. In general, as long as the wine is concentrated, I mean, that's always a factor. You can produce pretty light colored reds from Cabernet, for example, if you crop it at very high yields. But this looks like it's pretty high in density and concentration. On the nose, it's actually quite nice. It has those cherry flavors. On top of that, there's also a little bit of plum, prune character coming through, a little bit of spice. The wine is 5 years old, so the oak is pretty well integrated, I'd say, but you can still smell it. There's a little bit of roasted, toasty notes coming through. But all in all, a very complete wine that is more fruit-driven than driven by the oak. On the palate, it is actually quite rich, 14.5% of alcohol. The tannins are not too pronounced. I'm tasting this wine at a cooler temperature. I usually like to drink my wines or pour my wines at 16 degrees Celsius and then let them warm up in the glass. I'm talking about red wines, obviously. And at that temperature, the tannins usually come out a little bit more. But this is actually fairly velvety and round, which is another characteristic of Merlot. Merlot produces wines that are bigger in concentration. They show more alcohol at least. But the tannins generally are a little bit softer, a little bit more velvety. And that's why it's such a great blending partner with Cabernet. Cabernet adds the structure, the freshness, the finesse, the aromatic complexity, while Merlot really gives the wine, as the French would call it, gras, some fat. So it makes the wine taste a little rounder, richer. Cabernet generally is a little bit too lean. And if you blend the two together, the Merlot kind of fills the hole that Cabernet leaves on the palate. And the wine becomes rich and concentrated, but also structured, really balanced. And that's kind of what we are looking for. At least that's what I'm looking for. On the finish, the wine shows a little bit of bitterness, some chocolatey notes. It's a really complete wine, a very pure expression of Merlot. Would I have guessed that it's from Israel? Probably not. So this is a really good start. Not the best Merlot I've ever tasted, clearly, but a really good one. And I would rate this one 91 points. The next wine is the 2020 Moulin de Cadet Saint-Emilion Grand Cru from Bordeaux. In its home region, Bordeaux, Cabernet gets a lot of the attention, but Merlot is actually the most widely planted grape variety. It makes up 66% of all the red grapes planted. In the movie, Miles has this bottle of 1961 Cheval Blanc from Bordeaux that he keeps for a special occasion and then just drinks out of a plastic cup at a diner, not realizing that Cheval Blanc is actually a blend out of Merlot, his most hated grape variety, and Cabernet Franc, another grape variety that he talks badly about. Moulin de Cadet is located on top of the Moulin hill, and it's classified as a Grand Cru Classé. It's fairly small, less than 3 hectares, and they only planted Merlot here. The soils here are clay and limestone, which is considered to be the best soil for Merlot. Merlot and clay, they have a strong link, and many of the top Merlots come from clay soils. The consultant for this winery is Jean-Luc Tournevin from Valendreau, a really famous estate, and I poured myself a little too much to discard it, but anyways. But yeah, he's a really well-known winemaker and consultant, so I've got big hopes for this bottle. I'm just checking the alcohol, which is 14.5. I mean, Merlot tends to produce pretty alcoholic wines, especially if you want to produce high quality wines. If you let the grapes ripen, they accumulate a lot of sugar. So in most cases, high quality Merlot goes hand in hand with high alcohol levels. So this wine comes from 35-year-old vines. The yields are fairly low at 40 hectoliters per hectare, and they started farming organically in 2002. So this wine was aged in 500-liter barrels and barriques. And I'm guessing they do that in order to get less oakiness into the wine. Bigger oak vessels are becoming more popular. I mean, I oftentimes like them because they allow the wine to mature. They allow oxygen into the wine. They also give off a little bit of flavor of the oak, but less so. So oftentimes the wines come out more fruit forward, more fruit driven, and show less of these intense, charry, oaky, chocolatey notes. So the wine, again, is quite concentrated. It's less brown, it's more purple. So there is less aging. Well, you can see less of the aging process of the color. And yeah, it looks good. Let's taste it. This is good. This is really nice. I mean, there's lots of really bright cherry flavor there. Really fresh, like really fresh, ripe cherries, straight from the tree, right into the glass. But obviously a little bit more than that as well. Otherwise, you could just eat cherries. There's also a little bit of cigar box flavor. There's a little bit of spice, a little bit of cinnamon pepperiness, and yeah, it's quite complex as well. On the palate, this is really crunchy, fresh, delicious, really lively. I've had some problems with some Saint-Emilion wines recently, or over the course of the last few decades, because they've kind of become really fat and rich. Some have more than 15% alcohol, they lack acidity, and therefore just feel too heavy. And this has a nice balance. I mean, this is not a light wine, but it combines the concentration and richness with crunchiness, acidity, good tannic grip. So yeah, I like it. So I'm going to rate this 94 points because it's absolutely delicious. And it has a great price quality ratio, because in Europe this retails for less than 35 euros. I'm guessing in the US less than $50. Obviously not a cheap wine, but it's a great wine, so it deserves to fetch a higher price. But this also shows that Bordeaux really has a lot to offer. I mean, people often think Bordeaux is super expensive. Some estates, they produce really expensive wines, but there are so many wineries that produce great quality wines at really still affordable prices, and this is one of them. So let's fly across the pond and across the whole of the United States to California, where this wine is from. It's produced by a winery that is very much associated with the grape variety Merlot, Duckhorn, and it's the 2021 Napa Valley Merlot. Duckhorn was founded in 1976 by Dan and Margaret Duckhorn during a time when, well, Napa Valley wasn't really well known, and Merlot was probably also not all the rage in California. It became a big success, and it then went through the ownership of many different private equity firms. I don't really know who owns it right now, but it's a bigger conglomerate nowadays. The estate is still really famous and still has a very strong link to Merlot. But this is not a pure Merlot. I think the blend is 76% Merlot and the rest are Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. So not the pure expression of Merlot. In California, you can still just label it Merlot, even if you just use 76%. I think the threshold here is 75%, while in Europe it's 85%. The wine stayed for 15 months in oak. 40% of the oak were new, so 40% new barriques. And well, that's pretty common for Merlot, as you've noticed in the previous wines. Merlot often, high quality Merlot at least, often is aged in barriques because it just adds a little bit of complexity and also a little bit of structure to the wine. The wine is again at 14.5% of alcohol, so yeah, they've all been 14.5 so far. So this is a little bit lighter in color, I would say, than the previous wines, which is a bit weird, considering that this is actually a blend with Cabernet Sauvignon, which should add more color to the wine, but this is not super dark. It's still a dark red wine, but it's more ruby in color, and you can see your fingers through it in some parts of the glass at least. This is much more fruit driven. Again, cherry flavors, but more Bing cherry, more Amarena cherry kind of flavors, really intense fruitiness. There's also a flavor of blackberries, black currants, so it's a bit more dark in fruit flavor. On the palate, super concentrated. The tannins are a little bit harsher, a little bit more structure there. Good freshness, quite balanced. I think, the intensity of the fruit flavor just kind of points towards Napa. On the palate, it actually feels almost a little leaner than the previous wines. So it has more grip, which is obviously also, well, there's some Cabernet in there. So the Cabernet will just give the wine a little bit more tannins. But it's all really well balanced and quite an interesting wine. There's a little bit of bitterness there, which doesn't always bother me. Here it's maybe a bit too much. But yeah, overall, this is really well made, quite delicious, quite complex. and I'm going to rate this 92 points. We're going back to Europe, to Bella Italia, in order to taste the 2019 Caselferro from Ricasoli from Tuscany. The Ricasoli family is one of Florence's oldest families. They can trace their roots back to the 13th century, and they have quite a big winery operation in Tuscany. In the past, they were protecting the city of Florence and had quite a lot of influence, and I guess they still have quite a lot of influence today. They were involved in creating Chianti as we know it today, and this, however, is not a Chianti. It's actually an IGT wine, so it's outside of the DOC system. So you could definitely call this a super Tuscan, as it is a Merlot in Tuscany. The grapes for this wine come from 3 different vineyards. They are manually picked, and then the grapes are fermented in stainless steel tanks. They then spend close to 2 years in tonneaux and barriques in order, well, to make the wine taste more interesting. So we are again at 14.5% of alcohol, which is interesting. But the bottle is much heavier than all of the other bottles so far. So the wine shows a little bit of browning. I mean, the core is ruby red, but there's a little bit of garnet color towards the rim. It's a dark and concentrated wine, and on the nose it's dark and concentrated as well. It has a strawberry flavor, and yeah, there's some really red fruit notes coming through. So the cherries that are often associated with Merlot, but also some strawberry, some peppery notes as well. On the palate, this is really kind of, it grips you. It's really exciting on the palate. My tongue is dancing right now, you know? Yeah, this is really special. It combines quite a lot, but it does it in a really nice way. Wine has a lot of concentration, but also great balance. I mean, everything is there. So this is not just a soft little Merlot. This is a really serious, complex wine. 100% Merlot, but really, yeah, really exciting. So I'm going to rate this 96 points. Great wine. And I think it's just quite young still. After, 5 years? It still feels young. So I think in 10 years, it probably is even better. We are staying in Italy for the next wine, which is the 2021 Cantina Talan Gant Merlot Riserva from Alto Adich, from the north of Italy. And it has, you guessed it, 14.5% of alcohol. To be more precise, this wine was actually bottled by the Cantina Talan, while the producer officially is Cantina Andrian, another cooperative that merged with Cantina Talan a few years ago. Yeah, they just became one happy family. I still haven't figured out why in other regions and countries cooperatives generally don't produce the greatest wines, but in Alto Adich it just seems to work. I mean, I don't know what it is, but the members of the cooperative really deliver great grapes and the wineries produce amazing wines. So oftentimes the cooperatives in this region in Alto Adich produce the best wines in the region. People often think that the northern regions must be much cooler than the southern regions, and that's kind of true, but it's also not true. I mean, Alto Adich can get really, really hot in summer. It can be unbearable in some parts of northern Italy. I've been there many times in June, July, when it's just really humid, hot, and well, this can be great for ripening grapes, obviously. That's why Merlot works up there. So the wine is harvested at, well, that was a miss. The wine is harvested at low yields, around about 40 hectoliters per hectare by hand, and the wine is then fermented in stainless steel tanks. The malolactic fermentation actually takes place in barriques. This is a method in order to make the wine appear more gentle, soft early on, and oftentimes those wines just, taste better when they are young, as opposed if the malolactic fermentation takes place in stainless steel and not in the barrel. I recently tasted the 2021 Gant against the 2017 Gant, and I preferred the 21 just because it felt fresher, more vibrant, cleaner, more fruit driven, which is something I appreciate. The 17 was a little bigger for whatever reason. Anyways, so this is kind of dark in color, quite concentrated, but again, not showing lots of signs of aging. It's more ruby red. The fruit flavor is quite bright. There is like cherries, a little bit of smoke, like old pipe, like this kind of dark, smoky kind of dimension to the wine. But it's really well blended into the fruit flavor, giving the wine more complexity. On the palate, it's grippy and structured, lots of power and concentration. It's fascinating because those wines, I mean, this is from northern Italy, but it almost has more power than all of the other wines, including the Napa Valley Cabernet in terms of like pure concentration. But it also has crunchy tannins and good freshness. So it's not hot, not too powerful. Pretty nice, pretty good wine. Yeah, I'm going to rate this 92 points. I think it's good. And I mean, all of those Merlots so far were really nice wines, really delicious wines, well selected, but obviously also showing that Merlot can perform at the highest level all around the world. But now let's move on to the last wine. Last but not least, we're tasting the 2012 Merlot Northridge Vineyard Waluke Slope from Washington State, Walla Walla to be more precise, and the winery is K. Vintners. The winery was founded by Charles Smith, who was the manager of Danish rock bands before falling in love with wine and then deciding to make wine in Washington State. I really wanted to have a wine from Washington State in the lineup because when I visited the region, I kind of thought that Merlot really shone there, and I think it was kind of well known for Merlot. But after Sideways, Merlot became less popular, so people stopped putting it up front on the labels. Syrah became much more important, and Merlot was oftentimes blended in to a Bordeaux blend, which is a bit of a shame. I mean, come on, guys, just stick with what you're good at and produce some awesome Merlot, like hopefully this one. According to the website, Charles Smith started in 1999 selling 330 cases of Syrah from the trunk of his 1987 Astro van. You gotta love those stories. Really well told. I think he was a manager of a rock band, but I think he's, on one hand making great wine, but also really good at selling his wine. He's a iconic character, so the wine world needs more of those people. This wine obviously will also be interesting because it is 12 years old, 2012, so just to show that Merlot can age. Hopefully it can age. I don't know. I've never tasted this wine, so I don't really know. By the way, this is actually the first wine that isn't at 14.5% of alcohol. It's actually at 15.5, which is a lot of alcohol. When people think of Washington State, they often think of Seattle, which is kind of known for its rainy weather. But most of the wine production is actually across the Cascade Mountains in the east of the state, where you really have a desert. And Walla Walla is very continental in climate, so it gets really hot there. However, they still have quite a lot of water in Washington State because of the Columbia River, which is a massive river bringing lots of water into the state. So they have to irrigate the vineyards, but they have an ample supply of water. So let's see. The wine is actually dark in color, ruby red with a little bit of browning towards the rim, but it's, considering that it's 12 years old, it actually looks younger than some of the other wines. This is a fascinating wine. I think it's probably a wine that you should decant and you should allow it to breathe a little more. I don't do that in those videos because otherwise it would be unfair and it would become logistically really challenging to decide after I open the bottle whether I want to put it away for a few hours or not. I just can't do it. I just open the bottles and pour, and I have enough experience to kind of say whether a wine, in which direction a wine is going to develop over time. Obviously, I mean, filming this video takes longer than the 20 minutes you'll see. I give the wine a little bit of time. I allow it to breathe, but I can't decant all the wines and keep them in carafes for hours or days before shooting this video. So we didn't get the information for the 2012 vintage, but in 2020 they did whole berry fermentation in French oak and left the wine on the skins for 49 days, which is different, a bit weird, but this wine tastes different. So I'm assuming that he's done something different in 2012 as well, or the same thing, just as different as in 2020. Am I making myself clear? Probably not, but yeah, this is interesting. So the wine smells of grapefruit, pomegranate, raspberries, black cherries. There's a lot going on here. It just is very complex and it's just starting to open up. It actually doesn't taste old at all. I mean, it doesn't taste really aged. It tastes like, well, it tastes delicious or it smells delicious, but it doesn't feel like it's running out of steam anytime soon. On the palate, this is so rich and powerful, yet really deliciously fresh and grippy on the finish. The tannins are quite soft and velvety. So yeah, it's super concentrated, super rich, but still really, really a lot of fun. It's not heavy. So I'm going to rate this 98 points. It's just an amazing wine, really delicious. Would I want to drink the whole bottle? No, I would want to share this with someone else or a few other people. But yeah, wow. Such a beautiful, beautiful Merlot. Whoa. Man. This was a delicious tasting. And if you're still in doubt, I think we should drink more Merlot. Or you should give Merlot another chance, because the grape variety produces great wines that are not just boring and flabby and fat. They can be much more than that. So my favorites here were in the price quality ratio category. Definitely the Moulin du Cadet, a great wine. And at that price point, I mean, you can't really go wrong with this. And the best wine of the tasting was definitely this, the 2012 K Vintners Merlot of Northridge Vineyard Warluke Slope. If you can't remember all that, just check in the description. I put all of the wines there together with a link to Wine Searcher. But yeah, this was just stunning. Really, really beautiful. And you remember I did this Petrus video a few years ago, and this kills Petrus for sure. I mean, that Petrus that I tasted in that video. This is just wow. But a big wine, a big wine with lots of character and personality. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please like it down here. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And my question of the day is, what do you think about Merlot? Do you like it or not? What are your favorite Merlots? Let me know down below in the comments. But whatever you do, stay thirsty.